important sites in the city of Orlando?
Yeah, and I think I have an answer for you, and basically allow that what I've done for the city of Orlando, I've tried to do for the state by supporting historic preservation.
Three, two, one. Today is February 14th, 1998. My name is Derrick Gatlin. I am doing an oral history on the Wellsbuilt Hotel. This is my first interview number 1, and today we have Representative Alzo Reddick from Orlando. Representative Reddick, how long have you lived in Orlando?
I've lived in Orlando since 1944, literally the age of Moses.
Okay, and how long have you been a representative in Orlando?
I've been a representative, a member of the Florida House since 1982, which at the conclusion of the term will mean 16 years that I've spent.
Okay. You've been here quite a while, so could you describe, as best you can, the racial makeup of the city as you were growing up, some of the things that you remember, or how it changed over the years?
The population of Orlando was approximately 45 or 50,000 during my youth. The black community was subscribed on 4 sides by the larger white community and the undeveloped area. In other words, the black community lived in the inner city, and that is Colonial Drive would have been far too north, and maybe Gore Avenue would have been maybe the southern boundary within that area. For people that are not familiar with Orlando, just think of where the arena is located today, where Gore Avenue, that would constitute the north and the southern boundaries, and Division Street to 441 would have been the east-west boundaries. Those are rough to give you an idea kind of where the concentration was.
Okay. Because I'm aware that during the early part of this century, we had racial problems. So being that this was a black-only hotel, could you describe the race relations from the 40s through the 50s and 60s and how they changed and some of the things that affected blacks during those times?
Specifically, we had a strict segregation observation in Orlando. There were 4 or 5 black-owned hotels. The ones that are most prominent in my memory as a child growing up, one would be the Wellsbuilt Hotel on South Street. Number 2 would have been the Walker's Hotel on Jackson Street, on the street in which I live. There was another on Terry Street near Sharpie's Tea Room, and there were 4 or 5 rooming houses, as it were. But the laws of segregation were strict. Black people did not enter houses where white people were. There were no black policemen until at least the mid-50s, my recollection, and they could not arrest white people when they first came on the force.
Okay. Excuse me. In your opinion, did you see that race relations got better over the years? I know at the advent of the civil rights movement and the civil rights legislation, that was to help us. But did you see the race relations get better in the city?
I saw opportunities improve for African Americans in several ways. The first chief that really, Jim York was one of the chiefs that really made a big effort to see blacks promoted, or African Americans promoted on the police department. And under Mayor Carl Langford, there was some significant improvements. And so overall, I have seen some change in the racial atmosphere, and we have had some leaders that were especially helpful in that regard, and some leaders were more helpful than others. But the police department leadership has been one of the best examples of where African Americans are now promoted, and that's one of the big changes that I've seen.
Okay. What are some of your earliest memories of the Wellsbuilt Hotel?
My earliest recollection of the Wellsbuilt is that the black community was basically the inner city blocks that are around the hub of Church Street and Parramore. Church Street was the commercial area, South Street, Jackson, Parramore. We had 4 doctors and 2 dentists that I can recall at this time in, say, 1945 and 1946. And the 4 doctors, one ran a hotel, Dr. Wells. Dr. Hankins had Hankins drugstore. There were a couple of pharmacists, Dr. Beverly. But basically, this was the commercial area. What is now Church Street, Parramore, is where most of the doctors were located. All of their offices were located in a 2 or 3 block radius. Dr. Spade, the dentist, Dr. Wells was on Church Street. Dr. Eccleston was on Church Street, another dentist. Dr. Hankins' office was located on Parramore and South Street. So the lesson that I'm trying to give you is that all of the professionals were located in this area, and their homes were also located in this area. So we had middle class, lower class, and no class all there together. But the doctors, number one, there were no lawyers in Orlando until 1952, I believe, 51, 52. So the doctors, the principals, the teachers, and the ministers were the people that set the pace. If you notice today, I have on a tie, and I wear a tie almost every day of my life, and occasionally I wore ties in high school, and I admire those people very much.
Okay. Did you ever get an opportunity to visit the hotel?
Yes. Every day of my life for 3 years, I was in front of that hotel. The Wellsbuilt was where the black paper boys picked up the Orlando Sentinel. That's a harsh recollection, but if you were a paper boy for the Orlando Sentinel, during the days of segregation, all of the papers came to one spot, and so one would go to that spot, the Wellsbuilt Hotel, and pick up the papers and roll them up, get on one's bike, and then proceed to move. And so from 1953 until I went off to college, every day, I cannot remember being ill. I can't remember missing a day from assembling in front of that hotel every day for 3 years, and it became an important part of my life because that's how I earned my dollars, because I played football and it was a good job for me. Mm-hmm. And now the passion that I feel about this project is probably connected to that.
So the Wellsbuilt was an extremely important fixture in the community.
It was next to the South Street Casino, and the brothers and sisters were getting back. You know, on Saturday night, the dances that occurred. Mm-hmm. This was the life of the community. This was not the basic juke, but we had big bands coming in there. Big bands, everyone from Billie Holiday to Count Basie. The name Bull Moose Jackson was one of the people that Bull Moose Jackson, and I would sing a little bit for you today, but we're not prepared for that.
Hey, you can sing if you want to. There's no problem. Okay. Okay. Could you tell me, how did people view the hotel? Did they view it as a beautiful establishment as far as appearance, or did they just think it was run-of-the-mill, or how did they view it?
The Wellsbuilt was not viewed for its aesthetics. The Wellsbuilt was a functioning part of the community because it was a hotel on the upper floor, but on the lower floors there were 3 businesses. As I recall, there was a dry cleaning business. There was, I believe, some sort of beer garden, and the other business escapes me at this time. But aesthetically, the Wellsbuilt, the Hankins building were all a part of the business commercial mix, and so there was not any great appreciation for aesthetics, but the functioning part, everyone appreciated what it meant to the community to have the excitement of the weekend dances, and of course the doctors were at the top of the pecking order, and people enjoyed having their professionals rub arms and shoulders with them.
Okay, you mentioned a little earlier about some people like Billie Holiday and Count Basie. Are there any other names that you can mention that visited the hotel?
Well, the other names that I've heard, Ella Fitzgerald, Ray Charles, Count Basie, Louis Armstrong, I know played here. Jimmy Lunsford also played at the South Street Casino, and they were all here. My recollection of the bands, Louis Armstrong is the musician that I saw, and of course Jackie Robinson stayed at Dr. Wells' home when he came to visit, when the Dodgers brought him here, I believe, the first time in 1948. So I saw Jackie Robinson. He did not stay in the hotel. He stayed in Dr. Wells' home. So those were some of the most famous African Americans. I also saw Walter White, who was the president of the NAACP at one time. So these are the people that I saw and remember.
So those types of people got to visit. Did the everyday common regular fellow get to come in there and frequent the hotel to partake in the activities?
Sure. The ordinary fellow that would visit the hotel, black visitors, in most instances, ministers and other professionals, if they were coming to visit Orlando, they would not stay in a hotel. Sometimes musicians would stay in a hotel, but by and large, more common folk would stay in a hotel. Professionals and people that were better connected would usually stay in someone's home. The hotel served a variety of purposes. It was a boarding house. It was a place for convenience for travelers, but by and large, the professionals did not stay in the Wellsbuilt. The musicians stayed there, but the doctors and the few attorneys that were traveling to Orlando at that time would have been found in someone's home.
Okay. Could you name some specialized activities or events held there for any segment of the people, such as women's groups or fraternities or churches or anything of that nature?
My recollection are primarily of the dances and the business activities that revolved around the area. The black business community, the Orlando Negro Chamber of Commerce on Church Street, led the efforts toward desegregation. The early efforts to boycott the Carver Theater, about 54, were led by a gentleman by the name of Z.L. Riley. The connection between Church Street and South Street is that one is one block south of the other, but I'm trying to describe for you that this was the hub of the black community. Z.L. Riley, Dr. Wells, Dr. Hankins, Mrs. Hopkins, Dr. Eccleston, these people, Reverend Collier, excuse me, as you were, these people constituted the cutting edge, the most significant citizens. So the social events, for example, the sororities and the fraternities, there were active cultural groups, but as a child, my recollection of the AKAs or the Deltas or the Alphas, and I wouldn't mention the word Kappas on here, but those activities only came into consciousness later. As a child and as a student at Jones, I was more concerned about where the doctors lived, the kind of cars that they drove, their real estate holding, and a part of the reason we're here is because they gave a good lesson for investment in the community.
Okay. Let me jump here. What was the reaction when the hotel was closed? What was the reaction to the community leaders, when the hotel was closed?
There was a whimper and a sigh, not a bang. A whimper and a sigh, not a bang. The African American community in Orlando traditionally has reacted to only 2 or 3 things that I can recall. The closure of Jones High School, the shooting of a fleeing felon. In one instance, by and large, the collapse of its cultural activities and the Wellsbuilt Hotel and the Quarterback Club and the South Street Casino, there may have been anguish, but there was not a collective sense of anguish because the community has never had the cohesiveness to say, we're not going to allow this to end. What I'm seeing in 1998 is significantly more than I saw in the 70s. Right now, because of the leadership of past and a number of our other cultural entities, we're seeing a coming together. Jones High School has been a big rallying point for people of Orlando, and now there's a connection between the Wellsbuilt Hotel, past, and the memories of Jones High, where people want to memorialize their part of history. So I'm saying to you that it is my opinion that we see a greater movement toward collectivization as relates to trying to recapture some of our cultural history than we did when we just kind of slowly subsided beneath the waves.
So were there any movements at all to keep it open? Anybody?
Yes,
No.
The movement to keep it open
At that time when it was closing?
I think the family tried to keep it open, but they were overwhelmed by declining number of people utilizing the facility, additional costs to maintain it, and then much of the middle class black community moving out. So the efforts were valiant but unsuccessful.
Okay. You are a politician, so I want to get your opinion on your role in historic preservation in the city or even statewide, types of things that you are doing or have done in historic preservation.
Well, I think the proudest thing that I've done during my years as a member of the legislature, to pass 2 constitutional amendments, and one of those constitutional amendments dealt with historic preservation. I'm an educator in my civilian life, and I feel passionately about historic preservation. I feel passionately about the black community, and I feel passionately about connecting economic development to the inner city. So for me, this is the proudest achievement, the marriage of historical preservation theory, how do we do it, and the reality of having a hand in securing the dollars that will make the Wellsbuilt come alive again, will make Jones High come alive again, will make South Street come alive again with concern. So this is clearly one of the things that I hope history, when they judge me, someone, maybe you'll be a PhD by then, will come along and footnote that Dr. Reddick not only talked the historical talk, but walked the practical politician walk and got things done so that future PhDs will do their footnoting and say, boy, that paperboy did pay some attention to what he was doing.
Okay. Excuse me. How was Dr. Wells received in the community?
Dr. Wells was a respected and shrewd businessman. So it meant that, and I'm not going to use the language that described this, all the doctors were, all the 4 physicians as well as the dentists were all respected. But Dr. Wells was a tough businessman. He had the reputation not taking any trash, and I think I might have picked up that habit from him. He did not suffer fools gladly, and he was a businessman that insisted that that one pay him, that one should carry out one's obligations. So the reputation was that he was astute, that he was shrewd, and that he, by and large, was a good physician, and that was the reputation. He was not the person that you could go and run up and give him one of those bear hugs, hey bro, and this sort of stuff. He was a man that was respected.
Okay, you mentioned earlier about these businessmen and these doctors provided good examples about investment opportunities in your own community. Other than the hotel, what other activities or companies was Dr. Wells involved in?
Dr. Wells had a great deal of rental property. Dr. Hankins owned a building located on the corner of South Street and Parramore. Dr. Eckerston, I believe, owned some property. Prior to extensive loans for blacks or African Americans, the entrepreneurs were generally two people with capital. They were the doctors, because until 1951, there were no black attorneys in Orlando. So the business capitalists in the African American community were the doctors because they had capital. And sometimes people that live close to the outside of the law. And there's a little thing for future PhDs called Bolita or Cuba. And Bolita and Cuba was the black man's version, poor people's version of what the lottery is today. And I know this interview isn't to talk about Bolita and Cuba, but I want you to understand that growing up in this community, there were businessmen like the doctors, and then there were Bolita and Cuba operators that did exactly what the state of Florida is doing today. We take dollars from the lottery and say we're going to do great things with it. And some things we do. But the illustration that I'm trying to make for you, if you don't have economic development and people can't secure dollars by one mechanism, they will secure it by another. And so that's a little insight. And I know people my age won't remember anything about Bolita and Cuba, but there was a Bolita man, there was a Cuba man, and some of these people, whose names I shall not call at this time, also had businesses in the area.
Okay, problem. Very understandable. Did Dr. Wells face a lot of, you said he was well respected, but did he face problems or a lot of problems from blacks or whites in the community?
Yes. Every property owner faces confrontation by the people with whom they do business. Dr. Wells, I know from personal recollection and reviewing some of the history of Dr. Wells, there was a great deal of money spent with plumbing in his properties, where passive destruction is one of the things that occur. People are never exactly happy with the landlord, and so one of the problems was what I would call passive disobedience, tenant aggression. In some instances, people would just tear up your property. It wasn't graffiti, but people did drop things in toilets. And so all I'm saying is Dr. Wells faced some of the opposition from people that with whom he did business. But the mere fact that he died of old age, not confrontation, says that he got along well enough.
So what about the establishment in the city as far as the county commissioners or the city, people like the mayors or anything? Was he revered by them, or did he have any conflict with them? Other than just being a business person, did he have any other, because he was a successful African American in the community? Let
me respond to it by saying the following. By and large, the doctors were not the political catalyst. Mr. Z.L. Riley was hard on the civil rights action that was occurring. A gentleman by the name of Grandpa Williams and some other folk. By and large, Dr. Hankins became very involved in civil rights activism a little later. But my recollection is that the doctors, the dentists, the principals of the schools and the teachers were not the activists in civil rights, and they were the principal recipients of equal opportunity, but the activists tended to be other people.
Okay. As far as the community around the hotel, Wellsbuilt Hotel, is concerned, well, was the when they had functions or events, were there any Were there? Let me see. Would you characterize it as being
Let me
virtually
characterize it for you.
problem-free, or did they always have conflicts between people? Because I know that's, you're gonna have conflicts regardless, but were people always causing problems and fighting and all things of that nature?
Let me characterize it for you. I live near what is now known as the Citrus Bowl. I find it far more disruptive to live near the Citrus Bowl than it was for people that live near the South Street Casino. I lived on Jackson Street, so it was not nearly the same sort of impact. So that's my recollection is, by and large, these people knew each other. It wasn't if there was a horde of people coming to the South Street Casino from out of town. The music was loud, and sometimes people did drink a little too much, but by and large, it was an event that was tolerated and accepted. The South Street Casino was not 2 blocks from Big Shiloh Baptist Church in Mount Pleasant. So, by and large, it was accepted. Would be my response.
Okay. When did Dr. Wells come to Orlando?
It's my understanding that Dr. Wells was actually born, grew up here in Orlando. Dr. Wells had family. There were several sisters in Dr. Wells' family, one of whom was my teacher. So Dr. Wells and his family were well ensconced when I moved to Orlando. So my assumption is Dr. Wells, the family, they lived all over Orlando. They lived on Chapman Street, Jackson Street, South Street. So there are at least 3 or 4 brothers and sisters that I knew growing up, and my understanding is that they were here.
Okay.
So I assume that they were born or came here at an early age.
Okay, and when did Dr. Wells die?
Dr. Wells died in, I believe, the late 60s or early 70s is my guesstimation. I'm not sure the year that he died, but in that range.
Okay. And finally, if you could you already spoke about you being a young man, doing your paper route through the Wellsbuilt Hotel. Could you give me some fond memories or otherwise of the hotel?
The fondest memories of the hotel for me, Bill Jennings' father lived on one corner, Dr. Wooden, Dr. Wells, Dr. Hankins, Dr. Eccleston lived on another corner, Mrs. Allen. The mixture of the people that we admired most were all there together. Reverend Collier was the dominant minister, and so the names that I'm mentioning to you were really not the only members of the middle class, the upper middle class, but these names constituted the people that we admired. They set the standards about what they expected for us, and they didn't go around making sermon to us, but the way they conducted themselves, the way they care for their homes. One could not look in Dr. Wells' home or Dr. Hankins' home and find a home that wouldn't look like any doctor's house in the United States, and the way they carried themselves became a part of what it was to be right in that milieu, to live not 2 or 3 blocks from the hotel, not 2 or 3 blocks from the physicians and major ministers, was all a part of what it was to grow up black in Orlando, Florida.
Okay, Representative Reddick, that concludes this portion of the interview. I'd like to thank you for your time.
I thank you for your time the best of luck on your studies, and I hope you'll continue to a PhD and come back and do some more work on the Wellsbuilt in Orlando.
I'll do my best. Today is February 14th, 1998. My name is Derrick Gatlin. I am doing the oral history on the Wellsbuilt Hotel. This is interview number 2 with Miss Mamie Perry. How you doing today, Miss Perry?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. How long have you resided in Orlando?
I believe I came here as 32, I believe it was, 32, 33, I believe it's 32.
Okay. And could you describe the racial makeup, the types of people that were in Orlando when you came, the setup of the community as far as white people, black people, Spanish people, to the best of your recollection?
Oh, yes. Dr. Wells and his wife, Clifford Wells, Dr. Hinkins, I had their names, all of them down, but I know them very well. But when you get up in age, you forget, you got to think.
I understand, it's no problem. It'll come to you.
All those doctors was right around on that corner.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Spates, because he was my special doctor, Dr. Spates was. And in fact, I haven't had anybody in my mouth since Dr. Spates passed away. That is way back there, years ago.
Okay.
Dr. Spates did all my denture work when he was living. That'd been about 30-something years ago. And Dr. Wells, he and Clifford, his wife, we sit from the 5th seat